Question. What kind of bear is best?
That's a ridiculous question.
False. Black bear. Fact. Bears eat beets.
Oh.
Bears. Beets. Battlestar Galactica.
Bears do not...
Duke, what's with the hair? You got aspirin?
You should feel better momentarily, and your memory will slowly return.
Duke, what's with the hair?
The specific...
Yeah, Bob. You remember Bob, the guy that's gonna launch a nuclear attack? You got any more abuse you want to hurl my way? Or are you ready to go in here and take care of Bob?
What do you propose, Bob?
When in doubt, C4.
It's your favorite crazy little penguin Bob here, and we're back for some more penguin thoughts. I gotta share my thoughts, you know. That's what us penguins do. We share our thoughts. So, you know, well, let's get into it, shall we? I got a few things I want to talk about. We got some stuff from Star Trek and from Star Wars. Hey, Gracie. They'll call me Rambling Bob, I see. Anyway, I was originally going to do some of this last week, but just real life got in the way, and so some of this stuff maybe already happened like last week. But you know, I'm a penguin. I don't really have the concept of time in the first place. Not really well, unless we're dealing with like time travel. Then I'd sort of do maybe, because you know it's pretty obvious you go back like to like the 1800s, because like they don't have even like really running water, indoor plumbing, and things like that. So you kind of notice those things. No Wi-Fi, but other than that, so a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, I just didn't get to until now, and I know some of it happened like last week or the week before last, because like one of the things we're going to talk about is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars games. But let's get into it, shall we? Without any further ado, let's just do it. Okay, so unless, of course, you've been living under a rock, there has been some, oh joy, Disney plus Star Wars news. The Star Wars show, The Acolyte, or what I like to call Pedialyte, because once again, it's Disney's way of thinking that they can bring the franchise back from the dead. This little penguin does not hold out any hope at all for anything coming out in Disney Star Wars. All they keep doing is poking the dead franchise around, just kicking the can down the road type of thing. Because needless to say, until leadership there changes, their political leanings change, their ideology and this wokeness stuff is gone, I don't see that Disney Star Wars is going to get any better, in my opinion. If anything, it's just going to go further down the rabbit hole, and poor rabbits, they're going to get drowned with wokeness. Anyway, there's a new show coming up, I think like in April. I've not even cared enough to even find out when this show's coming out. I guess I need to, because I might be bothered to review it. I don't know yet. Because it just seems like it's not all that great. Anyway, Disney plus Star Wars, The Acolyte casts dark side upon High Republic era. The much anticipated trailer, not really, I don't know who they're talking about much anticipated. I wasn't anticipating it. The Star Wars The Pedialyte has finally landed, offering a glimpse into the untold stories of the High Republic era. Not area. Era! For those of you who don't know what the High Republic era is, it happened before the prequels by about a good, I want to say it's supposed to be like 100 or 1,000 years. The same time, it's supposed to be around the time that the video game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2 took place with Kyle Katarn and well, actually that's Jedi Academy and so forth as well. But nevertheless, it takes place before any of the established stuff by George Lucas, which I'm not really happy with him either lately, because and I don't have an article for it, but he apparently in the last week or so decided to go ahead and side with Bob Iger and Disney on so forth. and giving his support behind them. Now, I sort of understand why. He's got stock in the company. When he sold Star Wars to Disney, he got half of that in Disney stock. So he does not want to see losing money. And I think he's also at the age where he just no longer cares. Because I know, talking from an older penguin, that the older you get, there's just some things you just don't care about anymore. And, but one thing I do care about is iced coffee. So, as always, we got to pause and sip them if you got them. I'm sipping mine, man. I tell you, I can't live without it. Okay. Yeah. Some of you like hot coffee. I'm a penguin. I don't like the hot. I like the cold. Come on, give it the program. At least you're drinking coffee. That's what matters. Anyway, the Pedialyte show. Yes, that's what I'm going to continue to call it, the Pedialyte show. Set 100 years before the prequel trilogy, during a period of relative peace, the trailer reveals a galaxy on the brink of upheaval. Fans were treated... No, they weren't. They weren't treated. They were just given the scenes of Lee Jung-jae instructing younglings in the Jedi Temple, which we're going to watch the trailer here in a second. I don't care if it... My channel's not monetized anyway. Yeah, I know. You're inner wolf. You like it hot. Whatever. Anyway, basically, this is the show that's under the creative vision of Leslie Headland. Oh joy! She is the former Harvey Weinstein's secretary person, something like that. I don't know. Either way, she's not a good person, and I'll show you here in a little bit what she really thinks about Star Wars. Most people don't realize this, and she's heading up this next show. That's why I don't have much hope for it, because of her personal creative beliefs about things. To say she's woke is an understatement. She's like woke on steroids, thrown in with Hulk-sized anger. You can just feel it from her. Anyway, not to mention there's also that big old mess in the background, supposedly, that her and Potato Kennedy were siphoning money from other projects to fund this project. Which, that's just rumor out there. I don't know if it's really happened or not. I don't know anybody that can even confirm that for me. All I know is I've just read some things and heard some things, watched some videos and stuff, and there's enough out there to make you kind of like go, I wonder. And I wouldn't put it past these people. I mean, I don't really... These people that are running this stuff, especially at Disney, they're just not very... They're narcissistic. They think their stuff just doesn't stink, and they think that they can't do anything wrong, and that if you don't buy into their stuff, well, guess what? You're an idiot. And I'm not an idiot. I'm a penguin with eyes coffee. And slapping people with fish, I tell you, you got to. Because, the fish, you got to slap the fish. You got to keep them in line because, the fish Armageddon's coming. I'm telling you, they're uprising. Anyway. Let's go ahead and take a look at the... I just don't really want to continue reading the rest of this article. Let's go ahead and just watch the Acolyte trailer. And I'm going to pause it a couple times because there's this this one part. I haven't watched this all the way through. I've only watched the first about 20 or 30 seconds of it. But there's one part that I already noticed right out the bat that just... Really? They just didn't even pay attention to. So, anyway, let's get into it.
Close your eyes. Your eyes can deceive you. We must not trust them. Tell me what comes into your mind.
Life.
At least one thing I can say for this show, it does look like they're not using the volume. Supposedly what I read the other day indicates that they actually are using real sets and so forth. So maybe they learned a thing from Andor. I don't know. But that would be probably, in my opinion, the only positive about this show, that at least that they're not using the volume. And don't get me wrong, I like the volume, and the volume can be, it can look okay if it's done correctly. I mean, a good example of that is like in Mandalorian Season 1, Jon Favreau used the volume. If you don't know what the volume is, it's this gigantic room that has like all these. Matter of fact, let's Google that real quick here. Maybe we can get a picture of what it looks like. The volume is this, all the little pop-ups. Okay. As you can tell right here, you see like how it looks like there's a seam and so forth. What that is in the background is giant LED screens. And they can project images up on them. Think of them as like giant monitors. This is the volume from Star Wars. They used it in several. Lucasfilm has kind of created this technology, and they're using it in several different products. And they, in my opinion, they've kind of used it overkill. And it seems like they're not learning how to really properly use it, because there's been times in watching, like in Season 3 of The Mandalorian, I could tell when they're using the volume. It's like, at least to my eye, it's very obvious that they're not using a real set. That's why one of the things, even though Andor was not very well received and it was slow moving, I feel like Andor was one of the few properties that current Disney Star Wars has created that actually felt like Star Wars. Now, it wasn't great. It was just meh. But I think the thing that made it look like Star Wars was that they used actual practical sets and locations and scenes and actual scenery and props, and not the volume. And I don't know if they used the volume at all in Andor or not, but nevertheless, supposedly in the Pedialyte show, they're going to be using not this, but they're supposed to be using actual real sets. And probably real locations, I would assume. Because this does not look like, right now while we're watching this trailer, does not look like the volume. It looks actually like a proper set. Movie set.
Balance. I see fire.
Now, wait a minute. I gotta pause it real quick here. Notice how you see something wrong. One thing in this picture is not like the other. The Jedi Master who's teaching these young Jedi younglings to close their eyes and to focus because their eyes can deceive them. You see one of them that maybe, I don't know, doesn't have their eye closed? Maybe it's because they're an alien race that can't close their eyes? Here's a hint. Right here. Right here. Looky there. Follow the red cursor. Follow the red pointer. Right here. This little guy's not closing his eyes. Quit peeking. Oh, wait a minute. He's got no eyelids. Anyway. Continuing on.
I see fire.
Someone is killing Jedi. It doesn't make sense.
Wait a minute, there's a Wookiee. I want to see the Wookiee.
It doesn't make sense.
There's the Wookiee. I wonder who that is. He looks familiar. He looked like he may be in one of the KOTOR games. I don't know. I'll tell you this much. My 2 cents worth, I hope they leave some of the... Yeah, I love Wookiees too. Chewbacca is one of my favorite characters. Laugh it up, furball. But nevertheless, there is... in Star Wars KOTOR, there is... I'm going to look that up too. I'm just curious. Let's see here. This is actually from... I do believe that's from the... actual game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And maybe Republic 2. I don't remember. Excuse me. I don't remember. I haven't played that game in so long. I need to break it back out and get familiar with it again. Especially it might help me to have a better understanding of what's going to happen in the Pedialyte show. Because KOTOR supposedly happens around this time period as well, that the Pedialyte show is supposed to be happening. And I'm hoping against hope as well that they leave some of my beloved characters out of this. It's like there's... Oh, let me see here. There's one of my all-time favorite... Yeah. Anyway, this is Frere. I don't think that's the Wookiee I was thinking of, though, because this looks like a female Wookiee. And I say that because of the thinner and not broader shoulders. I don't know. Oh, I'm wrong. It's male. Maybe it's it's probably a teenage Wookiee. Like I said, I don't remember. It's supposed... I have to play that game again. But one of the characters I'm hoping they do not ruin in this game is a guy named Darth Revan. He is a Dark Lord of the Sith. And just an overall cool guy in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Granted, he's a Sith, but nevertheless, he's just a really cool character. And this is supposed to happen around the same time as the Pedialyte show. And I wouldn't be surprised if Disney Plus, if they know anything about that stuff, they'll go out of their way to once again try to ruin more of our favorite franchise. And in this case, now they're diving into destroying the video games, which they've already kind of been doing that anyway. But crying out loud, they don't have to go full tilt. I'm tired of this junk. Anyway, let's continue on. But there's a Wookiee. Ah!
What happened?
I sensed darkness.
And just so you don't know, this is back when Jedi were everywhere. They were the galactic police force, so to speak, of the universe, of the galaxy. So they were like in their heyday.
This isn't about good or bad. This is about bad.
I did like the crash ship thing. That was kind of cool. because it kind of reminded me of...
This isn't about good or bad.
It looks like a mix between like a Naboo fighter and an A-Wing. Which I'm a ship guy anyway. It's one of the reasons why I love Star Wars. When this little penguin was growing up, and he's just a little gosling, I had practically all the Star Wars ships that were made by Kenner. I had X-Wings, Y-Wings, B-Bomber. I don't think I had the B-Bomber now I think about it. The B-Wing. I did have the Millennium Falcon. I had the Star Destroyer. I even had the twin cloud car from the Bespin. This is back when, the original trilogy was the only thing there was. There wasn't the prequels. There wasn't the sequels. It was just episodes 4, 5, and 6 when I was growing up. Yep, I can't help it. I'm an older penguin. But to me, that is Star Wars. I even had one of those AT-ATs and an AT-ST as well. And a speeder bike. Because my favorite was always still to this day, will not ever change. I am an Empire guy. I love Empire Strikes Back. That is still my favorite Star Wars movie if I had to choose one. Anyway.
This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
What is that?
If you didn't catch that, that's a red lightsaber, which means it's a Sith. And I just think this looks meh. June 4th. Okay. Not April, June. I didn't even pay attention because I didn't watch the rest of the trailer. And now seeing the rest of the trailer, yeah, I wish I hadn't. And this penguin used to love Star Wars. I just can't stand this stuff. It's just going to get worse. And here's why. The creative person, Leslie Headland, who's in charge of the creative vision of the Pedialyte show. This is a sound bite, a little excerpt, a little less than a minute video we're going to watch up on X from Star Wars Theory. He posted this, I don't know when. Nevertheless, he posts, he says, lol, okay, Leslie, I have a lot to say, but I think I'll stay quiet on this one. What do you think, chat? Leslie Headland talking about the problems with Star Wars, George Lucas prequels from a SoundCloud interview in 2019. This is the person that's created this show, the Acolyte, who's running it, the showrunner. Let's listen to what she has to say about Star Wars. We'll get into Star Trek stuff here in a little bit. This is bad, by the way. I can't believe she actually said this kind of stuff.
This is like what we understand to be Star Wars, like the idea that like that only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be.
What? Did you catch that? And she said that like that Star Wars came from George Lucas, and that he's the only, and the concept that only he's the one that can. I'm having a hard time wrapping this little penguin's mind around this. Let's back it up. Let's start it again.
Like what we understand to be Star Wars, like the idea that like that only came from George Lucas, that only George Lucas holds the key for what we understand to be Star Wars is just untrue.
I don't know, Leslie. Did you create Star Wars? Look at her smug face. By the way, how many people do you actually see that look like she has a square head? I don't know. Do humans normally look like a square-headed person? I don't know. I'm just a penguin. I don't really notice those things. You all look alike, but this one kind of sticks out because her head looks more square than the rest of them. Anyway, but she has the audacity to stand there and kind of talk about the fact that that Star Wars didn't only come from George Lucas. George Lucas is the one that created Star Wars. There would be no Star Wars without George Lucas. You got to at least acknowledge that. Now, does that mean as a different IP like Disney you can add to it? Sure. You bought the IP from George. That means George gave you the okay, gave Disney the okay to go ahead and create their own stuff. Although he probably thought in his mind when he handed it over to Bob Iger and Potato Kennedy that they were going to do him right, but they didn't. And now I think he's just like the rest of us. He don't care. He just wants his money. And I don't blame him.
And I think the prequels are an excellent example of that. I mean, the idea that, like, when you're hiring a director, that everyone is sitting in there waiting for George Lucas and not for the person who's going to know to hire Ralph McQuarrie, that's the problem. That's the misogyny
misogyny. It's misogyny. What? It's misogyny. Why do you gotta go there? Why do you gotta make it about sexism? That's stupid. George Lucas, with the help of, by the way, his wife at the time, Marcia Lucas, created Star Wars. That isn't misogyny. Anyway, these people, I just can't get over it. It just floors me.
And the problem with the auteur myth as it stands today, because they're not thinking this is the person that will hire the right people, and this is the person that will be able to create the lookbooks and direct people to get them to that place. They're just thinking, do you have all the answers? And the truth is that nobody does, and anybody that says they do is lying. This is like what we
I don't think anybody claims, Leslie, to have all the answers, but I will tell you this much. You wouldn't have Star Wars if George didn't create it. Sorry. You could try rewriting history as much as you want, but without George, there wouldn't be a Star Wars. Simple fact. Actually, scratch that. One extra thing in there. Of course, with the help of all the people he had, like Marcia and all them helping him, there wouldn't be Star Wars. But more importantly, also, there wouldn't be Star Wars if it wasn't for the fans back in 1977 when the original movie came out. People went and saw it in the theaters, and it became the overnight sensation the worldwide overnight sensation that it did. We wouldn't still be talking about Star Wars if those two things didn't happen. George didn't create it, and that the fans didn't like it. Because look at what's happening now. All the current stuff that Disney's pushing out. Do the vast majority of Star Wars fans like it? Nope. This is one little Star Wars penguin that does not like it, and I am, to be honest with you, I'm just apathetic anymore. I don't think anything they're going to create coming up is going to be good until the people that are there making the decisions are gone. And I mean everybody from Bob Iger on down. Just get rid of everybody. They either mean sell Star Wars and Lucasfilm to somebody else that may be willing to be able to actually take the mantle of George Lucas and redo things correctly and actually make it feel like Star Wars for once and leave out all this woke crap. Or get rid of everybody that's in Disney. I don't see either one of those things happening. Sorry, I'm a little cranky today. Because I'm telling you right now, I'm just tired of this stuff from Disney. They just keep beating a dead horse. Crying out loud, the horse is in 15,000 pieces by now. Granted, you can turn it into glue, yet they keep beating on it. Oh, and here we go. More news. One of my all-time favorite games back in the day was Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 from back in 2005. Okay? Well, a company named Aspire decided to make, this is not a remaster, they decided to make kind of like an updated version of it, combine 1 and 2 and called it Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. And this thing was getting a lot of hype. It released, believe it or not, on this little penguin's birthday, March 14th, 2024 this year. And I was really looking forward to playing it. And I got into it, and lo and behold, was I really disappointed. For the U.S. side of things, there was exactly three online servers by Aspire that were working. And there was bugs. There was also random crashes. The servers sometimes would lock up. You couldn't get connected, or you'd be connected and all of a sudden you would lose connection. This game could have been, I mean, granted, it's not even really a remake. It's just adding more additional content and reskinning things, reshading, which I have actually gone out and did the same thing. Sounds like Second Life? Yeah. I've gone out and did the exact same thing with the old version of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Because look right here on Nexus Mods. You can actually already kind of do this. And to be honest with you, the mods for Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 of that year, let's just do this, actually look better than the classic collection that came out. So which one's this? Well, those are the new ones. No, these are the new ones. Right here. This is the, as you can tell right here, it's still being, people are still making mods for the old school game. And it looks way, way better in some aspects. Matter of fact, there is, look at this. This is a reshade that somebody did on the game. Here's what the original game looked like back in 2005. And here's what it looks like with the reskin, the reshade. Now, this is a mod. This is not the actual game that I'm talking about, the classic collection. This is a mod of the original game that was released by Lucasfilm. EA, I believe. And this is just one mod. Anyway. As you can tell right here, here's what, I mean, look at this. That doesn't look bad. But at the same time, when you throw in all the bugs and the fact that there was only 3 servers, by the way, there was over 50, I want to say 50,000 people on the day of release. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I was one of them. When this game released, Star Wars Classic Collection when it released, and you could actually get in to try to play. Couldn't get in to play with only 3 servers, and when you sometimes would connect, it's disconnected. And IGN even wrote an article about this. Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection launch is a disaster. On March 15, 2024, following a full day of backlash, Aspire has issued a statement on the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection's disastrous launch that has been plagued with server issues, bugs, and more. The publisher released a statement on its support page saying it experienced critical errors with its network infrastructure. Now, me being an IT penguin and used to being like things coming online and bringing your network and servers up online, you would think in the back of my mind that you would do some type of load testing. You would want to test the network. You'd want to see if people could actually get onto the servers, whether or not the servers are up and running, or not you're going to have problems. And it's clear that Asper didn't care. They just wanted people to toss down the $35 for the Classic Collection and just kind of like, throw it out there. Here's a tweet right here. Somebody doing this. 10,000 people playing on launch night. Only 3 servers that had 64 slots each. By the way, that was the feature they brought to this game. Because I want to say the game before, the original game back in 2005, you're going to have like a maximum of like 16 people. And it was actually meant to play over a LAN, not really over the internet too well. So the biggest thing they were pushing about this game was that they made it multiplayer. And there were 64 slots. And that they would have a nice, robust network infrastructure to be able to play with, play online. That didn't happen. Multiplayer doesn't work otherwise. Price tag of $35 US. So disappointed. This is robbery. Don't buy it. Matter of fact, so many people refunded this game. It's crazy. It's insane. Matter of fact, look at this. It's got mostly negative. Over 6,400 negative reviews on Steam. And yes, I still own this game because I hope that someday they may actually fix it. But one thing that I'm also a single player guy, so I like also playing the stories. And they did add some story content, and apparently people that were playing it on the day of launch and days following were mainly playing the single-player version of it, which kind of loses the point. But I eventually want to play through the new content. Like, for example, they've introduced some additional maps like Bespin, Rinvar, Harbor, Citadel, Yavin 4, Battle Arena. They've got some additional bonus heroes you can play as. Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars and Kit Fisto as well for the Clone Wars. They also added some different features and so forth. But notice right here, the biggest thing that they push, massive locations with up to 64-player online support. That just didn't happen. And supposedly they're fixing it, and it's supposed to be getting better. But I don't know. I'm not holding out much hope, but I do want to play it with the single-player story mode. Like they did add like Darth Maul, one of my favorite characters, General Grievous, Vader, Mace Windu, Yoda. Some of those characters like Vader and Yoda were already in the old game. But look at some of the negative reviews on this. I ain't going to read all these, but said, trust the reviews. We're in a time period a developer shareholder greed. Fight back with your wallet. Fastest refund this side of the Mississippi. I mean, look at this. You just scroll down through here. There's not any positive reviews. Oh, correction. I'm wrong. There is one. Only played for single player. And it's eons better than the original release on Steam. Controls are less clunky, and game definitely runs better. See, that is the positive. That's why I kept the game, because the positive is they did apparently give love to the single player version of it. But back in the day when people played this game, they didn't play it for the single player content. It was a multiplayer game. I remember playing this game with my two boys and my two goslings, and we loved this game. We played this game all the time because you could play as stormtroopers or jet troopers or clone troopers or Wookiees or Yoda or Luke Skywalker and all that kind of stuff. It was just fun. And I remember this game so fondly. I just can't believe how bad it's. It just shows you, in my opinion, not only this game, but the state of current gaming. And there's a thing out there right now called Gamergate 2.0 that's out. It's just things are getting worse. All the woke identity is trying to get into gaming. And I'm not going to get into this. I really don't want to talk about Sweet Baby Inc. They're the ones that were involved in the Suicide Squad killing of the Justice League and what they did to Batman and Flash and all them. Well, they're just one of several contract companies, consultants out there that are pushing all these developers to push woke content in gaming. The thing is, unlike movies and TVs, the gaming community is not having it. Instead, you know what they're doing? They're going back to retro games. Well, dude, yeah. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather play the original version of this game or other games. Go back to like playing KOTOR or something like that, because I have fond memories of those games. Back when the games were not bad. They didn't have all the bugs. They weren't rushed to be released and charge you an arm and a leg for them. They weren't also filled with identity politics or wokeness. This stuff just permeates everywhere. I'm just so fed up with it. This little penguin's tired. Wants to fight back. If I could, I'd slap every one of those woke ideology things with fish. You know, next thing you know, the fish Armageddon rising up will turn woke on me, and then I'll really freak out. All right, pause for iced coffee identification. Sip them if you got them. All right. Now, supposedly, with the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, strikes back with a first patch following Disastrous launch, and I don't know if they've had some additional patches. I've not played it since my birthday when it released. I figured I'd give it some time to cook in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, Aspire will fix things. Like they didn't even fix the controls. They didn't give you the option to change like the Y-axis on like a X and Y-axis on the flight controls like Mio to invert it. But now I guess apparently the ability to change is now in this latest update patch. I mean, it looks like they're trying to make things right, but only time will tell. And this could have been so great, could have been so massive for Aspire. They could have made a ton of money. They could, more than that, it could have brought a kick to the old Star Wars fan base that I'm a member of, and the gaming Star Wars fan base out there that just love playing good Star Wars games, which I'll admit, one of my favorite things to do is I like to kick into a good Star Wars game. But it's like, lately, all the latest games out there are just not all that great. I am going to try to play later on tonight. There's an update yesterday from Hello Games for one of my all-time favorite games, No Bob Sky. Actually, it's called No Man's Sky, but I call it No Bob Sky. And I'm going to be trying to maybe stream that a little bit later on tonight. Get into it. There's a serious update with like being able to make your own ships now and color things and space station upgrades. And I can't wait. Anyway, I already checked that out a little bit last night. I couldn't help myself. It's good. It's looking good. But, so, let's switch gears here. And let's get into talking about another franchise which was still good. Star Trek. Now, as much as this little penguin loves Star Wars, I'm even more of a Trekkie penguin than I am a Star Wars fan. Don't get me wrong, they are neck and neck in my book, but I've always, if I had a fish gun pointed to my flipper, I would have to choose Star Trek any day over Star Wars. But I'm not talking about current Trek. I'm talking about OG Trek. The stuff that still stayed true to Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future. Matter of fact, speaking of which, William Shatner, who, by the way, just the other day turned 93. Looks pretty good for a 93-year-old. Good old Dave Tiberius Kirk himself has come out once again and talking about this new Star Trek and how it doesn't abide by Gene Roddenberry's rules for what made Star Trek Trek. And I agree with 100% on his take on here. William Shatner thinks that Gene Roddenberry is twirling in his grave over new Star Trek. And this is not the first time that William Shatner has talked about current Trek. As a matter of fact, I think that's also the reason why anytime you see Paramount, CBS and Paramount promote anything with Star Trek, and they show all the captains in Star Trek, the one captain they no longer have in their content or in their posters or in their publishing media, they leave out Kirk. They leave out Shatner's captain, which, hello, just like you couldn't have Star Wars without George Lucas, I firmly believe you could not have Star Trek without Gene Roddenberry and William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley. Come on. The 1966 Star Trek's what started it all, baby! Anyway. With a property as sprawling as Star Trek, of course, everyone has their own opinions. Yeah, I just gave most of mine on which entry is the best and which entry is their favorite. Those might be two distinct answers. It shouldn't be a surprise that OG Star Trek star William Shatner thinks that OG Star Trek is the truest version, and I agree with him 100%. Not just because of his involvement, but because of creator Gene Roddenberry's vision. Now, Alex Kurtzman, and all of them, they've not been working with Gene Roddenberry, obviously, because he's dead. But for that fact, they've not even paid attention to those that have worked with Gene Roddenberry. Instead, they've been listening some to Gene Roddenberry's son, which, by the way, if you didn't know that Eugene Roddenberry, who's Gene Roddenberry's son, I think he only got involved with Star Trek because, well, short of the stick, in my opinion, because he needed the money. Because the whole time that his father was around doing Star Trek, he had no interest in Trek. It wasn't until only this later iteration of stuff where Eugene's even gotten involved. Anyway, Gene Roddenberry, he was in the military and he was a policeman who eventually became a writer and ended up eventually creating, not only did he create top shows, but he also wrote Star Trek. He had several strict rules you need to abide by those rules. Around that, the writers had to write the drama. So in other words, same thing George Lucas did for Star Wars. The things that actually create this universe, the Star Trek universe, the Star Trek world out there. He had guidelines that the writers had to write within. Roddenberry steered the series with the discipline that this is the way a ship works. Starfleet, if you didn't know, in Star Trek, is a military organization. And there is no militaries out there today that function like the current iteration of Star Trek. They just wouldn't do it. Because the part of the thing that's the problem I've had since day one of Kurtzman Trek is they don't adhere to military protocol. They don't really care about rank. They don't care about, occasionally they might stick to it, but they just kind of bend the rules however they want to see fit. And not really kind of staying within the realm of what makes Trek, in my opinion. Shatner explains that includes crew members not making out with each other, because you wouldn't see that happen in modern day military. Our U.S. military doesn't allow that. You can't openly do that. Can you have relationships? Sure. But you also need to have a certain level of professionalism and decorum about yourself. You are a military personnel. You're supposed to follow the rules and guidelines of being in the military. Well, as Star Trek progressed, that ethos has been forgotten in most recent shows, the actor observes. I sometimes laugh and talk about the fact that I think Gene is twirling in his grave. One moment, I'm having a technical issue. I got to change out the battery on my headphones. Okay, there we go. I know you can't see the headphones. They're invisible. They're in cloak mode. But they're wireless, and I had to change out the battery on it. Anyway, now I can hear again. Not that we're really listening to anything, but here in a little bit we will be. Let's see, where was I? Shatner. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, right here says, the actor William Shatner observes, sometimes I laugh and talk about the fact that I think Gene is twirling his grave. No, you can't make out with the lady soldier. Shatner, who hasn't watched the other Star Treks very much, recalls big fights between Roddenberry and the writers of Next Generation. He reiterates that Roddenberry wouldn't approve of the romances between crewmates on the new shows, adding that the difficulty in the beginning between management of Next Generation and Roddenberry was all about Gene's rules and obeying or not obeying those rules. Matter of fact, if you've ever watched Star Trek The Next Generation, has anybody ever seen a moment in that whole 7-year series where you saw Captain Picard really kind of metaphorically letting his hair down? I know that's a funny thing to say from a bald guy. Has anybody ever seen really him let his hair down? Maybe in front of Riker, but that's about it. Because he kept a certain level of decorum as captain, as the leader of the crew he was in charge with. That he's in charge of keeping them safe, keeping them alive. Shatner has got his own shot at the pilot seat, directing the movie Star Trek V, which he lists as one of his biggest regrets. I wish that I had the backing and the courage to do the things I felt I needed to do. He reflects, saying management altered his original concept of Star Trek goes in search of says potato, but it means God. That's what happened in Star Trek V. From there, it was a series of my inabilities to deal with the management and the budget. I failed. In my mind, I failed horribly. Now, see, that's also something else you won't see in current iterations of Star Trek. Not from any of the actors or even from the shows themselves. You won't see them acknowledging their mistakes. They don't appear human. They appear more like they can't do anything wrong. That they're the bestest ever. And here's William Shatner admitting right here in this article that he didn't do right by Star Trek V, which I'll admit is one of my least favorite Star Trek movies. When asked, what do you regret the most? I regret not being equipped emotionally to deal with a large motion picture. So in the absence of my power, the power vacuum filled with people that didn't make the decisions I would have made. That said, he would be willing to return to the Star Trek universe under the right circumstances, so long as it wasn't a stunt like Leonard Nimoy's cameo in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 movie. Shatner states if they wrote something that wasn't a stunt that involved Kirk, which, by the way, he also later on admits that he doesn't like the way, not in this article, but I've also read that he didn't like the way that his character Kirk actually died in Star Trek Generations, which I agree with. It's not my favorite. I don't like that. Because, for one, kind of goes against what Kirk's character was saying, that he told Spock and McCoy that he always knew he died alone, that he'd die alone. Well, he didn't die alone. Picard was there. And also Soren, technically. Anyway, Shatner states if they wrote something that wasn't a stunt that involved Kirk, who's 50 years older now, 93, it was something that was genuinely added to the lore of Star Trek, he would definitely consider coming back. Here's another article on this. William Shatner is right to say that Star Trek has lost Gene Roddenberry's original ethos. Star Trek isn't what it once was, and that's not a good thing. And I got an article I'm going to read here in a little bit on Bulwark. By the way, all the articles and videos and everything that we're talking about are, once again, I always put that stuff down in the description. There's a lot of them. Matter of fact, I even segmented them off under Star Wars news and Trek news. So you can find these articles and read them for yourself to see if you agree with. Don't take my word for anything. I'm just a little penguin. What do I know? The only thing I claim to know anything about is a little bit about Linux and sipping on iced coffee. Which, speaking of which, sip them if you got them. Gotta stay hydrated, don't you know? Okay. Star Trek has evolved dramatically so over the years. It went from a standard sci-fi affair in space to a far more vaunted and complicated franchise. It's so complicated that multiple hands have had to helm the various television and streaming series over the years, which has caused a problem. Instead of sticking to the uniformity that series creator Gene Roddenberry demanded, see, even after, a good example of this, even after Roddenberry died, there was still like Rick Berman involved, and Terry Matalas and other people like that were actually involved in all the other Star Trek shows after Generations. There was Voyager, there was also DS9 and Enterprise, and they were all kind of taken on by the same core group of people. So you had uniformity, you had continuity. These were people that also worked directly with Roddenberry and shared his vision and tried to keep the shows as closely related to his vision. Now, you would think Paramount and Alex Kurtzman in their right mind would say, hey, why don't we tap into people that know Star Trek or that have worked on this stuff and ask their help? Have they done that? No. Instead, They just kind of done their own thing, done wherever they wanted. Most of it to push their own ideology. Matter of fact, Kurtzman's even come on record saying he thinks Star Trek is a platform. Although he wants to be done with it now because it didn't go anywhere. He killed it. Sorry, Dad. It's just like Star Wars, kicking around the can. Anyway. Instead of sticking to uniformity that series creator Gene Roddenberry demanded, each creator decided to treat the show as a variation. This is talking about New Trek. Creating a variation of something they'd rather see, just with Star Trek name in place, in name only. Shows like The Next Generation, Voyager, and others did well enough to stay in line with what Trek was, even after Roddenberry passed, just adding a different element all on its own. Yet, when Bad Robot and Alex Kurtzman got involved, Star Trek changed overnight. It was more action-heavy. Pew-pew. Yeah, it's all about that. And that's not what Star Trek's about. Yes, it does have phasers and there's always fights and stuff like that, but it was more about the science than it was anything else. And exploration and hope and positivity and hope for the future. Everything was more overt and less nuanced. It stopped being a show for Star Trek fans and started to try to be a show for everyone, which Star Trek never really was that. I mean, yes, it can appeal to everyone, talking about old Star Trek, but it had a niche. Star Trek, unlike Star Wars, was never really a show that was an IP out there for the masses. It had its cult following, and that was about it. It was not the goal of what Roddenberry was trying to do. It wasn't the same direction that Lucas took with Star Wars, in other words. Various shows have failed to hit their target goals, with huge gobs of money being spent on properties that don't net much of a return. The lack of viewership became an issue when the money spent was called into collections. Now, streaming providers like Paramount Plus had to start paying their debts. Matter of fact, once again, there's still rumors out there that Paramount is about ready to go under financially. They are in debt. And a lot of that is because of the vast money and lack of return they got from Star Trek, which you would think would be the one IP that Paramount has that would actually bring their brand the most revenue. But it hasn't. It just hasn't. It's not been profitable. And now they're in talks with what's the company? I'm having a brain fart. I don't remember. There's a couple of companies out there that are actually, I know Warner Brothers is one of them, that is one to look at possibly just purchasing Star Trek separate from Paramount. But there's also another company that is possibly buying everything out from Paramount right now. And I don't know what the status with that is. I haven't looked into it recently. Anyway. Things have gone sideways for Star Trek, and while shows like Strange New Worlds are trying to get back to the magic, which I do believe that some things in Strange New Worlds has tried to make an attempt to return to form, but they still haven't made, in my opinion, they still haven't made it all the way there. Various other shows spat in the face of Roddenberry's universe. William Shatner has noticed that. Speaking to the Hollywood Reporter, Shatner explains that Star Trek has lost its ethos that made the show what it was, and that Roddenberry would be spinning in his grave going to say he was in the military and he was a policeman. So there was this militaristic vision of you don't make out with a fellow soldier. There are strict rules and you abide by the rules. Around that, the writers had to write the drama. But within that was the discipline of this is the way a ship works. Notice the word discipline in there. I said that in the last article as well. That is something that's not seen in current iteration of Star Trek. There is no chain of command. Yeah, there are officers, and they do have ranks, but they don't act like the ranks they're in. I mean, when an ensign can tell the captain what to do, and the captain goes along with it, or they all grab a group hug to agree to do something, that's not the way the military works. There's a clear discipline and a chain of command. Because if you don't have that, people die in the real world. Now, granted, we're just talking about Star Trek here, and that's not the real world, but that is the vision that Gene was pushing forward to what made Star Trek Star Trek. And he's right. The franchise has gone so far away from what the original point of the franchise was that it makes sense why so many fans have rejected the newer content. And I'm one of them. Skydance. That's who it was. Skydance Media has been rumored to be considering, actually not just Star Trek. They're actually talking about buying all of Paramount, not just Star Trek itself. Warner Brothers is interested in purchasing only Star Trek. And I know that I've shown on a previous Penguin Thoughts about, and I'd have to look up that link, that there is a property that's been created. Yeah, there's also the rumor out there about Paramount Peacock merging. Yeah, there is. Like I said, all I know is Paramount is going down real fast. There's also a rumor out there that Kurtzman is expecting Paramount to buy him out, to buy out Bad Robot, because he's done with Trek. He doesn't want to deal with it anymore. Of course he's done with it. He's trashed it, now he's done. And he just wants out of it. I don't think they have the money to even buy him out, because I think Paramount is so much in debt right now. That's why they're entertaining all these offers from other places to merge with, to be bought out. They say merge, but it's more like a buyout. Anyway, I thought before I get into this last article, actually, I got two more articles, and then I got a video I created a while back that's actually about 8 minutes. We're going to watch it, talking about William Shatner and other comments he's made in the past about current day Star Trek. I found it interesting. Anyway, CBS chief says that Star Trek remains a priority for Paramount. Not really. Answers why Legacy has not been greenlit. Star Trek Legacy, if you don't know what that is the show that Terry Matalas was trying to get greenlit. Terry Matalas, who is actually a Star Trek fan, he actually used to work as a production assistant on Voyager and I think DS9, but I also know he worked on Star Trek Enterprise. He actually was in helped in writing in Star Trek Enterprise. And he got the chance to come in and help during Star Trek Picard Season 2 to help out Akiva Goldsman to create Season 2. Well, Akiva Goldsman and Kurtzman and all of them had something else that they had come down the pike they had to take care of, so they kind of left Terry Matalas to his own when it came to Star Trek Picard 3. And that's why we got such a vastly different show in Picard Season 3 as we did Picard Season 1 and 2. And I honestly love Star Trek Picard Season 3. I love what Terry Matalas did with them. And I personally think that, in my opinion, that the only way with current Star Trek that could actually be saved is get rid of Kurtzman and all these other people that are involved Get rid of all of them. Bring in Terry Matalas and give him 100% free reign. Give him Kurtzman's job and let him go at it, baby. Oh, Picard Season 3 was absolutely the best new Trek we've had. In my opinion, with it, and I did like a little bit of Star Trek Prodigy, but that's also because, once again, it was not written by Kurtzman. It was written by Nickelodeon, some of the writers at Nickelodeon, because it's made for kids. Which, by the way, pretty soon, there is supposed to be Season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy coming out on Netflix. And you can already watch Season 1, which I'm waiting for Season 2 to come out and hit Netflix, and I'm going to binge Season 1 and Season 2 all together. And then maybe I may make a video or two about it. I don't know. I did like Prodigy. But that's also a kid's show. So, but nevertheless, I liked it because I felt like it was a continuation of Voyager, which I've always loved Voyager. Picard Season 3, however, in my opinion, was a goodbye to the Next Generation crew. And I really love what Terry Matalas did in that whole thing. Well, at the end, spoilers, if you haven't seen Picard Season 3, the end of it, the very end of it, 7 of 9, gets made captain in the new Star Trek Enterprise 1701G. So she's the new captain. And they were supposed to be, and Terry Matalas was pitching this show called Star Trek Legacy that would be kind of picking up with the continuation of Star Trek Enterprise 1701G helmed by 7 of 9, which, in my opinion, I think would be a halfway decent show. Because of, I always liked 7 of 9. I didn't like her in Picard Season 1 and 2, but I liked her in 3. She went back to form of what she was like all the time in Voyager. And I also like the fact that Terry Matalas would be the one running it. It's his idea. It's his baby. But it's not getting greenlit because there's a couple reasons. One, there's a rumor out there that supposedly Alex Kurtzman does not want it to happen because it's not his baby. Now, that's just silly. When you want to promote someone that was successful underneath you, but because you're that much of a narcissistic crybaby that you can't greenlit that show because it's not your baby. That's just silly. And I don't know if the rumor of that is true or not, but that's just petty, in my opinion. Yeah, and yeah, the fans really want Star Trek Legacy, and I'm one of them. Because, let me rephrase that. I am one of them if, and only if, Terry Matalas has free reign to make Star Trek Legacy the way he wants to make it. And not have all this being his hand tied by Akiva Goldsman or Kurtzman or the powers that be. In other words, he's given free reign like he was given during Picard Season 3. That's the way I would want it to return. Want that new show to be made. The future of the Star Trek franchise remains in flux. Over the weekend, this was written back in March 18th, so it's not that far long ago. We reported that Paramount Pictures is putting together a plan to bring Trek back to the big screen. Yeah. And of course, we heard that before. They've been talking about this for the longest time. Supposedly Star Trek 4's back on the table again. I don't know. It's been taken off the table and put on the table so many times, it's almost a paperweight. Anyway. And Star Trek Discovery Season 5, which I'm glad to see that show go. It's supposed to be coming out pretty soon, and I will not be watching it. I stopped watching it. Actually, I stopped watching it when I saw the Kelpian who destroyed Warp Drive. That, because it just scientifically made no sense whatsoever. It just couldn't exist. Couldn't happen. What it told me was that the writers don't have a clue how science actually works, especially the science in Star Trek. And I was just done. Put a fork in me. I haven't watched it since. Anyway. And if you're someone out there that loves all this new Cartman Trek, more power to you. Hey, I'm not going to tell you what you like and what you don't like. Just for this little penguin, I'm not into it. I want the old stuff. I have watched Picard Season 3 a couple times now, and I may watch it again here pretty soon because I'm really missing good Trek. I still go back and watch DS9 and Voyager and Enterprise and Next Generation, and of course my favorite, the original series. I watch that stuff constantly. When I'm in a really bummed out mood, Trek baby is where I go, and I go to OG Trek. I just got through a couple, maybe about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I just binged Star Trek movies 1 through 6. I was in a mood to watch them over again. I don't know how many times I've watched those movies. I've watched them over and 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 over again. And I don't get tired of them. Especially like Wrath of Khan. Oh man. And one of my favorites, episode 4 and episode 6. Oh, those are so good. The Voyage Home and the Undiscovered Country. Oh man. That's back when Trek was awesome, baby! Anyway. So basically, in a nutshell, I'm not going to read all of this. With all the different things that are happening right now at Paramount and possibly being bought and so forth, I don't think they're going to be greenlighting anything new anytime soon. There's talks of a Starfleet Academy show. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Simply because there's a possibility, like I said, that Star Trek is going to be purchased. Either separately or as a whole with Paramount Plus altogether. And then, who knows what will happen. Anyway, let's watch a video I created about a year ago on this channel, on my YouTube channel here, called Captain Kirk, This is Current Trek. This is something that William Shatner came out and talked about at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2022, and his comments about current Trek. Step them if you got them. Hey there, all you YouTube family and friends out there, and especially those Trekkie friends of mine. Your friend in the neighborhood, little penguin Trekkie Bob here, and I just wanted to share I cringe. That I found out that I cringe when I watch myself now. My old stuff, it just looks so bad compared to what I'm doing now. It just happened at San Diego Comic-Con this year. It's really kind of cool. William Shatner, a.k.a. Captain James Tiberius Kirk, and to be honest, my favorite captain of all of Star Trek. Yeah, baby. Actually came out. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy for the win. Has agreed that this current era of Trek is not good. Let me explain. There's a little article here I found. Actually, there's a couple of them, one on Hollywood Reporter and another one on another site. This one's on Screen Crush. Now, notice right here. I just got through reading an article saying that he would be twirling in his grave, that William Shatner said this. And he said this 2 years ago as well. I find that kind of interesting. You would think someone who worked with Gene Roddenberry on a daily basis for what was Star Trek, what created the whole universe, the original series, you would think that the powers that be, Kurtzman and all them, since the man is still alive, that you would want his input on things. But no. He is person non grata. with current Trek. They want nothing to do with him. William Shatner on modern Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry would be turning in his grave. It says right here in the article, no matter where he goes or what he does, William Shatner will always be associated with Star Trek and Captain Kirk. Clearly, Shatner has viewed that as something of a mixed blessing through the years. He's openly poked fun at Trek fans in an infamous Saturday Night Live sketch, and he isn't shy about voicing his opinion when he's not enamored with whatever Star Trek is up to at any given moment. And at this particular moment, it sounds like Shatner is not a fan of what's going on in Star Trek, aka current Kurtzman Trek. Shatner appeared at his very own panel, Comic-Con. I want to say this was like a day ago. And at one point, he was asked if he felt any of the recent Star Trek series compared with the original Star Trek show that Shatner starred in himself back in the 1960s. And here's what William Shatner responded and said. He said, none of them. Shatner said before adding, you catch that? He actually said none of them are Trek. None of them are staying true to what Trek is. Got to know Gene Roddenberry in those 3 years fairly well, and he'd be turning in his grave at some of this stuff. William Shatner himself has admitted that he feels that this current shows of Star Trek, that being Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy, that none of them have been up to what he knows Roddenberry would have liked. Yeah, let me ask you this. Let us paint a picture. Can anyone in their mind right now picture Kirk, Spock, and McCoy on the bridge of the Enterprise? All of a sudden, an alien shows up on the view screen threatening them. And they go off near the turbo lift in the little corner, getting a group hug. One of them, like McCoy, starts to cry. And they all decide what action they're going to take. I can't picture that in my mind. That just doesn't look right. But I'm telling you right now, that very scene that I just described has happened in a show called Star Trek Discovery. Where Mikey Burnham, the bestest ever, Mikey Spock, as one YouTuber calls her, and Tilly and all them have gotten together. Instead of making a decision as a leader, they go and have a group hug and they cry about it, or they start freaking out, or they start sharing their feelings about what they think the alien's up to and so forth. I can't picture even Picard doing this with Riker. Or Captain Benjamin Sisko grabbing Worf and Bashir and say, hey, let's go grab a hug here and let's try this out and talk about it. How you guys feel about the Jim Hadar attacking us right now? What do you think we should do? It's crazy. It's ludicrous. It's my whole point here about this. That's not military decorum. You don't see people in the military in real life do that. Star Trek, where you want to or not, unless the show is about something else other than Starfleet. Starfleet is a military organization that was about exploration, yes. But they were still at the end of the day, they were still a military organization that had military decorum and professionalism and a chain of command. Matter of fact, he believes that Gene Roddenberry would be turning in his grave right now if he saw the state of current Trek. So Gene Roddenberry, the article goes on and says, Gene Roddenberry died in 1991. The last Star Trek show he had any involvement with was Star Trek The Next Generation. Shatner's last on-screen appearance. Yeah, did you catch that? The last show that Gene Roddenberry was involved with was Next Generation. That means there was still Voyager, DS9, and Enterprise that all came out without Gene Roddenberry at the helm. But yet they also had the same look and feel and professionalism and decorum that the Next Generation and the original series had. Why? Because they stuck with Roddenberry's vision. For instance, Captain Kirk came in 1994's Star Trek Generations. That's the crossover between Bridging the Gap of TOS and TNG era. Yeah, really bad movie. Although he continued to write Star Trek novels for a number of years after that, but that means it's been almost 30 years since either one played a major role in the franchise. The current wave of Star Trek shows includes Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, the animated Star Trek Lower Decks. While I can see Shatner not liking some of these series, get on with it. And indeed some Star Trek fans are not enamored with them either, this little penguin included, I think the only one out of all the new current Trek that I even somewhat like is either a little bit of Prodigy, because it's made for kids, and some of the Star Trek Strange New World series. But even then, there's some of it I don't care for. I do like some of that I don't care for now either. Pike. But that being said, Captain Pike... I did like Picard Season 3, but this is actually... When I made this video, it was actually before Picard Season 3 actually came out. All the captains is still not my favorite captain. Captain James T. Kirk is. Don't get me wrong, I like Pike, I like Archer, Janeway, Sisko, all of them. I would love to even see a Captain Worf series at some point. It's a Captain Dwarf. The closed captioning did. But yes, I would love to see a Captain Worf series. Not a Captain Dwarf. Captain Worf. W-O-R-F. My favorite has always been Captain James Tiberius Kirk. Yeah, baby. To me, this article and what he said really holds some weight. If the major character that started the whole franchise in the first place, Kirk, if the actor William Shatner, who played him, feels that current Trek has missed the mark, then that should speak volumes. And it should make current Trek, Kurtzman and all them, reevaluate what they're doing. It really should. But they don't care. All they care about is pushing their ideology and their platform. And throwing out what Star Trek really is. And to be honest with you, I'm hoping pretty soon that Chris Gore on Film Threat is going to be doing the trial of Star Trek. I'm putting Paramount and CBS on trial and Kurtzman for the death of Star Trek, like they did with Star Wars. Because I'm really looking forward to it. It'd be awesome if this little penguin could be involved in that, but I doubt it. I'm not that big of a deal. Even though I am a Trekkie penguin, I'm not that big of a deal. Nevertheless, I definitely will watch it. And we'll review it and watch it back and forth like we did the Star Wars on Trial stuff. It's like every other IP that's gone out here recently. It's all gone by the woke and the SJW stuff and the politics. And instead of being a good story, that always pushes some type of agenda. Well, if I wanted to watch politics, I'd watch CNN or C-SPAN or something. But I want to have a moment of my favorite geeky shows like Trek and Star Wars and things like that, Doctor Who.
I want to have something to where I can unplug, unwind, and just enjoy a good sci-fi story. Get immersed in that world. Especially to me, the world of Star Trek has always been something that I've always really liked and wanted to be a part of. Because the science in it is based on science. Some of it's science fact, some of it's science theory. But still, it's so cool.
Matter of fact, you can actually see that. And I'm not going to watch the rest of this. I want to get on to the last article that really sums up everything of what I'm talking about here with current Trek and my real feelings about it. When I read this article, the guy that wrote that article, I forget who, really nailed the way I feel about things. But going back to the science of Star Trek, most people don't realize and haven't put it together, but we wouldn't have cell phones the way they are today if it wasn't for Star Trek or tablets. That's just how much of an effect Trek has had on culture and science itself and technology in this day and age. It's amazing to me. That's why, for me, when I see the latest iteration of Star Trek under Kurtzman, and that they are totally oblivious to getting the science right, or even close. Now, granted, it's a sci-fi show, so it'd be sci-fi fiction. So a lot of it's based on science theories and science. Some of it's based on science fact, but it's also based on scientific theories. And I'm telling you right now, when they don't even adhere to modern day physics or chemistry or biology, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's like, that's not what Trek was about. That is such a big part of Trek, was the technology and the science and the exploration and the hopefulness, which none of that, in my opinion, is done correctly in the current iteration of Kurtzman Trek. All right. This last article is actually down there at the very bottom of the description as well, called by the Bulwark Plus. It asks the question about Star Trek. Are we all too cynical for Star Trek? The franchise evolution since the 1960s reflects disconcerting trends in American society. Crazy pop-ups. Let's zoom in a little bit more on this. Read a little bit better. What does it mean if we can't even trust the institutions in our imagined utopia? Starfleet, for those not also raised on Star Trek, is the exploratory, scientific, diplomatic, and military arm of the United Federation of Planets. The United Federation of Planets was actually a citizen coalition of various different planets in the galaxy. The Federation. Starfleet, which is what the main show is talking about, or seen in Star Trek. When you're on a ship, that's a ship in Starfleet. That's a military ship. Be it exploratory, scientific, or even diplomatic, nevertheless, that's what it was set up to be. The Utopian Interstellar Alliance featured throughout Star Trek's 12 TV shows, 13 movies, and assorted video games, novels, and comic books. Starfleet's exact role was left originally vague in the original series, 1966 to 69. The writer's guide for the original Star Trek explicitly encourages writers to stay away from it as much as possible. I don't know if you can anymore or not, but I know, like with Simon & Schuster, you used to be able to actually produce your own Star Trek novels if you wanted to. They had rules on how you had to write one. I was actually, back in the day, I never finished it, but I was writing one back in the day. Like, you could not the rules were like you couldn't change anything that was inherently Star Trek, like the ships or the characters. Like, you couldn't make, and I don't know what it's like nowadays, but you couldn't make like Kirk gay, like they've done in Kurtzman Trek. You in the novels, which adhered to the source material made by Roddenberry. Back when I was trying to write this novel, Star Trek novel, you couldn't actually do things like that. You couldn't modify who the character was at his core. It wouldn't let you. Anyway, but by the time Star Trek's heyday in the mid-1990s, Starfleet was established as an elite institution composed of brilliant and dedicated people, human and otherwise alien, who served in an organization resembling something like NASA, the Coast Guard, the Navy, and the Department of State all bundled together, with all the opportunities for incoherence and mission creep that jumble implies. But whatever else Starfleet is, it is good. Considered one of the most famous speeches in Star Trek Next Generation when Captain Jean-Luc Picard berates Cadet Wesley Crusher. Shut up, Wesley! I couldn't resist. I really didn't like Wesley Crusher. Anyway, he berates Wesley Crusher for lying to a Starfleet inquiry by reminding him the first duty, notice it says duty, the first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. Whether it's scientific truth or historical truth or personal truth. It is the guiding principle on which Starfleet is based. If you cannot find it within yourself to stand up and tell the truth about what happened, you don't deserve to wear that uniform. This is actually from an episode of Next Generation that Captain Picard actually said this to Wesley Crusher in that episode. I forget which episode it was. But I remember this speech from him. I mean, that right there flat says what a Starfleet officer should be. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. No matter what kind of truth that was. Not relative truth, like I showed in a video earlier this week, that truth is the key to everything, and it's not relative. It's fact. Just because you say that gravity doesn't exist, well, you try jumping off of your roof of your house, you'll find out real quick whether or not your truth's going to stand up or not. Because whether you want it to or not, gravity's a real thing. It's what keeps us on the earth. And you can say all you want that gravity doesn't exist. That ain't going to change the fact or the truth of the matter that gravity is real. That's the part that really kills me about this latest cultural shift with the woke ideology and stuff. It is a postmodernism view on steroids. It believes that everybody's truth is relative. You have your own truth, I have my truth, and then they have their truth. And that's not the way it is. And this is back in the time in the Next Generation when truth was actually truth. It was an immutable fact. Whether or not you liked it or not, that's what the duty of a Starfleet officer was, to scientific truth, historical truth, or personal truth. In short, to wear a Starfleet uniform is to commit oneself to the highest standards of morality, professionalism, and duty. Does that sound like anything that's in current day Trek? It does not to me. I don't recognize it in current day Trek. And that's what I feel like current day Trek is missing. It's missing the morality. It's missing the professionalism, the military decorum. Right. God's truth is absolute. Exactly. It's an immutable fact. And truth is absolute. It's not relative to what you think it should be. That's the whole point of the morality here they're talking about that's missing. in current day Trek. In current Trek, the morals don't exist because it's who or whatever you believe to be true is the truth for you. And that's actually what the woke ideology, that's one aspect of the woke ideology that's being pushed here. It's also another one, not professionalism. It's not professional to all of a sudden decide to let an ensign tell a captain what they do. What happened to Chain of Command? That ensign technically in Starfleet's only been around for a few years, where you're telling now a seasoned officer who's in charge of a starship, in charge of maybe 200 or 400 people, what to do with his leadership position. That's insane. It's like all of a sudden saying the guy who works at 7-Eleven can tell the president what to do. Now, granted, our current president's a bad example, but nevertheless, the guy at the 7-Eleven still wouldn't know how to run this country. Not that our current president really does either, but also then again, I don't think he's running the country. But I'm not here to talk about politics. But nevertheless, I am here to talk about professionalism and military standards and duty. That's something else you don't see in current Trek. To be a Starfleet officer, one must be willing not only to die in defense of the Federation in war, but also to die in defense of its principles and peace. Matter of fact, one of my all-time favorite, still makes me cry to this day, scenes is at the end of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, when Spock goes into the reactor chamber knowing that he's going to die. And he tells, the first thing he asks the captain is not how you think I did, or, I mean, eventually does that, but the first thing he asks me is if the ship is out of danger. Because the concerns of the many outweigh the few, or the one. He was willing to sacrifice himself to save the ship, to save his crew. This is not to say that the 90s shows never developed into the complexity and nuance of this ethos. Indeed, playing at the edges of their internal morality was how they derived much of their interest. A number of Starfleet admirals throughout TNG are shown to be venal or corrupt. One of the greatest episodes of DS9, In the Pale Moonlight, is entirely about how, in time of crisis, moral compromise may be necessary even for Starfleet. I believe that's the episode where they, let me see. That's the one where Cisco had to find a way to bring the Romulans into the war. Yep, exactly. One of my all-time favorite DS9 episodes. I love that episode. You hear a dialogue throughout the episode of Cisco talking about straight to us. Actually, he's making a captain's log, but it's like he's talking to the audience, talking to us, and saying how he had to rationalize making this lie and all the things he had to do to make this recording so that the Cardassians would turn on their own the Dominion, the Jem'Hadar. So they would enter in, and I said Romulans, or I meant the Dominion, not the Dominion in the Dominion War that the Cardassians. I meant that Cisco was trying to, in this episode, trying to turn the Cardassians against the Dominion to bring them into the war. So they'll fight against the Dominion with the Federation and the Romulans because they were losing the war against the Dominion, which those are the shapeshifters, if you didn't know. If you haven't seen this episode, it's season 6, version episode 19. I'd go watch it, and I may go watch that here in a little bit because it's got me pumped again. But it's a really good episode. And it shows right here, it shows the internal morality and struggle that Cisco had to have to try to bring them into the war and the compromise, and that he wasn't able to he had a hard time living with it, wrestling with it. You don't see that in current Trek nowadays. They don't have a problem with any of the decisions they make. They just assume that their decisions are the correct ones. And if there's a mistake, it wasn't their fault. There's something else that caused the problem. Anyway. In The Pale Moonlight, it's entirely about how, in the time of crisis, moral compromise may be necessary even for Starfleet. But such cases are treated as exceptional, unusual circumstances far beyond the norm. Exactly. In old Trek, the Star Trek that I know and love, it was an exception, not the rule. As a rule, Starfleet is good. And the best way to be a good servant of the true and just in the world of Star Trek is by being a good Starfleet officer. How does one go about being a Starfleet officer? By doing one's job, doing one's duty, by being a professional. Things are different in modern Trek. By modern Trek, I mean the 5 major TV shows right now that are currently in production. These are Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Strange New Worlds. Okay? Kurtzman Trek, in other words. Starfleet as an institution often plays a partially antagonistic role in each of these shows. Excuse me. And I'm also leaving out Picard Season 3 here, by the way. That's not included in this, because that's an anomaly. By the time of Picard, the titular Peregrine has quit Starfleet in a huff because it no longer lives up to his principle. In both seasons 1 and 3, it is revealed that Starfleet has been compromised by hostile alien agents and cannot be trusted. The first season of Discovery ends with Starfleet condoning genocide. Condoning genocide! That's wiping out a whole race, only to be stopped by our heroic crew. Season 2's villain was an out-of-control Starfleet AI that threatened all life in the galaxy. Seasons 3 and 4 keep the crew in near constant conflict with Starfleet and Federation brass. Lower Decks is centered on the adventures of a low-level officer who routinely defies Starfleet regulations to help nearby planets in ways that Starfleet would not condone, to actually go against Starfleet principles and morals. Even Strange New Worlds, the most archetypal type of the modern shows, which in my opinion, besides Prodigy, is the less offensive of all these, still emphasizes just how unjust some of Starfleet's rules are. In the first episode of the second season, the crew is forced to steal the Starship Enterprise itself to rescue a comrade in defense of Starfleet's orders. The 3 Abrams Trek films. Yeah, okay. I agree with what you're saying there, Tracy. That you said, I don't know, TNG went against Starfleet regulations. Picard and Riker were space cowboys, and Kirk was definitely a space cowboy as well. But in those shows, they were not the norm. They were the exception to the rule. Because if you remember correctly, just up here, Picard made it clear to Wesley that they were to be a person that's upstanding beyond reproach, that adhere to the truth. But in this current day Trek, they don't do that. Almost every episode, I don't really see the professionalism. I don't see the morals that's there. I don't see the moral struggle that's there, that's been in Trek since day one. Let's see here. What was I reading? The first season of Discovery ends. Oh, wait a minute. I already read that. Okay, here we go. We were talking about even Strange New Worlds, the most archetypal type of the modern shows, emphasizes how unjust some of Starfleet's rules are. In the first episode of the second season, the crew is forced to steal the Starship Enterprise itself to rescue a comrade in defense of Starfleet's orders. The three Abrams Trek films for 2009-2016 are essentially in a separate continuity and have a largely different production team, but they also frequently feature Starfleet as an antagonist. That they are down with the man. We got to fight against big old bad Starfleet brass. Modern Star Trek, much like older Star Trek, often presents its main characters as moral paragons. But whereas older Trek would usually depict them embodying Starfleet's ideals in the presence of challenging aliens, modern Trek is more likely to establish their uprightness by contrast with the faithless and untrustworthy institution of Starfleet itself. Both eras do both things, at least occasionally, but the ratio has notably shifted. What he's basically saying here is the same thing I just got through saying, that in older Trek, yes, there was times to where Starfleet regulations were not adhered to, but it was the exception and not the rule. It was not normally how the day-to-day things happened. In more modern Trek, it's actually the other way around. It seems to be that the moral stance, the moral uprightness is not the norm anymore. It's shifted. And some of that's due to the actual woke indoctrination into modern Trek that Kurtzman 100% believes in and 100% wants to push. Dylan Roth, writing for Fanbyte, suggested that as the Star Trek has aged, it has changed from a series about benign authority to one about Star Wars heroes protecting an institution from moral decay. That is true enough, but I also think there's something else going on with the modern Trek shows. Namely, the atmosphere and philosophy of the shows is much less comfortable with the maxims of professionalism and duty that were foundational to pre-2017 Star Trek media. In other words, they want Trek to be more laid back and comfortable. Setting aside the cartoons, in other words, the anime series, the characters in the core three modern shows, Discovery, Picard, and Strange New Worlds, are less concerned with professionalism and duty and more concerned with personal morality, authenticity, and teamwork. In the Deep Space Nine episode, The Ship, Season 5, Captain Sisko, trapped in a downed enemy warship with his senior staff, puts a stop to the bickering under pressure by shouting at them. I said, that's enough. You're Starfleet officers. Now start acting like it. Now I know it's hot, we're filthy, tired, and we've gotten 10 isotons of explosives going off outside. But we will never get out of this place if we don't pull it together and start acting like professionals. I love that when he did that. Sisko is one of my favorite captains because he's just flat out up in your face. He doesn't pull any punches. I love that. Embarrassed and chastened, his crew gets back to work. Compare this with Discovery's episode All Is Possible in Season 4, in which Lieutenant Sylvia Tilly crashes on a desolate moon while training cadets. To arrange rescue, she must, like Sisko, coax the bickering crew into cooperating. Her first decision is to make the cadets introduce themselves, icebreaker style, as if it's an HR-mandated company retreat. As they face various obstacles, Tilly repeatedly encourages the cadets to do work together as a team, but she never chastises them. In other words, there's no military discipline here. There's no, hey, I'm the captain, you need to start acting like Starfleet officers. In other words, no military decorum, no professionalism going on. She asks them in her final plea, "You got to decide now. Are we going to work together as a crew or not?" In response, one cadet announces that he doesn't trust another because of essentially racism. "I hear you," Tilly responds, before encouraging the other to share his own experiences. This leads to a kumbaya moment where they hang around and share their feelings, bringing the cadets together, and they are finally able to work together and get rescued. The only time Tilly ever reminds the cadets that they are in Starfleet is to encourage them to say "I" instead of "yes." Note the differences here. This is the part that really things I've been seeing, and it took me until I came across this article. I couldn't always put my finger on what I was seeing that was wrong, that was giving me the feeling and the bad vibes of current Trek, and why it didn't feel like Trek. As this right here was one of the things that kind of was a light bulb moment for me when I saw this. I'm going, now I know what's wrong. Note the differences here. Old school Cisco reminds his crew of the expectations he has for them, like a leader does. He doesn't want their input. He is their commander. He is their commanding officer. He expects them to act like Starfleet officers. He unsettlingly critiques their behavior as unbecoming a Starfleet officer. He acknowledges their difficulties. I know it's hot, but it leaves no doubt that he expects them to go beyond that and perform their duties as professionals anyway. New school Tilly motivates her command by making it clear that she sees and hears their concerns and their feelings, and encourages them to work together by seeing the value in their unique life experiences. If that happened in real life in the military, people would die. Because if there's not a clear chain of command, if there is not a clear person that's in charge in the decision making of what happens, be it wrong or right, then the people that are being led by that commander perish, including the commander themselves. I think in a real world experience, Tilly and her crew wouldn't last 5 seconds. Now, I'll be the first one to admit I'm a penguin that I tried to join the military, but due to medical reasons when I was in high school, basically I've had asthma all my life, and they wouldn't let me join the military. Matter of fact, I had multiple recruiters trying to get me into all 5 different branches of the military because of what I did on the ASVAB test score. If you don't know what the ASVAB is, it's like the SAT test for the military. I scored a 98% out of 100. I only missed 2 questions. I had every recruiter chasing after me, telling me I could do anything I wanted in the military. But because I had asthma, I had to go 5 years without a single attack, which I've never done that in my entire life, taking no medicine whatsoever. Then they would maybe consider letting me join the military. Why is that? Because I would be a liability on the field of battle. Whoever was in charge of me would have to be worrying about, okay, is Bob going to have an asthma attack right now as the bad guys are shooting us? I get it. I understand why I was rejected and not allowed to join the military. Because there are certain things that have to happen in a military structure. And feelings from the subordinates are not one of them. It's a clear chain of command. That's the difference of what I'm seeing here, the difference between old Trek and modern day Trek. Old Trek wants you to live long and prosper. In other words, not die. New Trek wants to live long and be comfortable. They want to hear you. They want to give credence to your feelings. They want to let you have a say in what happens. That's not leadership. Yes, leadership is listening, but leadership is more than that. It's influence. You can't lead someone if you don't have influence over them. And letting them tell you what to do is not influencing them, they're influencing you. This is what I call my seminal light bulb moment that I saw. What has made current modern day Kurtzman Trek not feel like Star Trek to me. And I didn't get it until just this example right here. All right, now, he does go on to explain a little bit. There are, of course, in text, reasons for the different approaches here. Sisko is talking to experienced officer, whereas Tilly is talking to cadets. Also, Captain Sisko is fundamentally different sort of person than Lieutenant Tilly, and also has a higher rank. He has more experience. But this difference in leadership style is everywhere between the two different eras, between Old Trek and New Trek. The Strange New Worlds version of Captain Christopher Pike has been repeatedly praised for being more collaborative than commanding. I struggle to remember a time he has ever raised his voice. Now, some things about Pike I did like. I like the fact that he does hear his crew out and that he eventually does make the decision. But I don't feel like it needs to be with every single thing. It doesn't need to be collaborative all the time. He needs to show that he is in charge. It says here, whereas Captain Sisko shouts at everyone, and as the only great Avery books can shout, Picard's version of its title character trades all his 20th century grouchy gravitas for a more grandfatherly role. His inspirational speeches now seek to buoy his friends' confidence rather than inspire subordinates to high achievement. Now, granted, some of that goes down to the command style that we saw between each commander and each Starfleet officer. But look right here is another comparison they gave. Compare how Lieutenant Commander Data in the Next Generation episode A Gambit Part 2 and Lieutenant Commander Paul Stamets in the Discovery episode. Both to connect handle subordinates who are not meeting their expectations. In other words, they're both dealing with the same situation here. The Data's dealing with an upstart that doesn't want to take him seriously because he's an android. And then Stamets is having people that want to do their own thing in his engineering. Data is confronted with a junior officer who is being insubordinate and undermining Data's authority. Stamets is dealing with a sentient shipboard AI that is willfully concealing mission control critical information to prevent the crew from risking their lives. Data professionally but sternly takes Lieutenant Worf to task. Lieutenant, I am dissatisfied with your performance as first officer. Informs him that he will transfer him to a different position if his performance does not improve. By the way, this is standing up to a Klingon. That's not an easy thing to do. And only after the issue is resolved does he clarify how important their friendship is to him. By the way, a side note with this. If Worf wasn't acting professional or acting like a Starfleet officer, him being a Klingon who has Klingon blood in him, their gut reaction is to react violently and with anger before any confrontation. It's a cultural thing. So the fact that Data is confronting him, if he was acting like a true Klingon, he would have tried to behead him. Not do what Worf actually did, which was to act like a Starfleet officer, to hold fast to his professionalism, military decorum, and his duty. Stamets, conversely, engages in what amounts to a lengthy therapy session before finally realizing that he and the AI need to arrive at a mutual understanding and come to trust each other, which will require work from both parties. So, it brings up the bigger questions here. Like, why the change? Part of it is probably has to do with the other material that Star Trek writers are drawing from. Basically, old Trek was from the 60s and 90s era Trek writers either served in the military themselves or drawing from science fiction written by people who had. Even Gene Roddenberry himself came from the military. Many of the great science fiction authors of the mid-20th century, including Robert Heinlein, Arthur Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Frank Herbert, by the way, who wrote Dune, and Walter M. Miller Jr., each served in some capacity in World War II era U.S. or British Armed Forces. Obviously, modern Trek writers are far less likely to have served. And actually, a lot of them don't even have really experience as writers. They're just like fresh out of college. Not even college. They're just, like in their early 20s. Don't have much life experience either. But they are far more likely to have worked in 20th century corporate America, which has rather a different set of norms and concepts of professionalism. It does. If you've ever worked in corporate America, which I have. It doesn't function like the military does. You do have meetings. You sit around talking about not necessarily how you feel about things, but your thoughts on things. And then your manager is the one who decides what's going to happen. At least that's the way it used to work when I was working in IT. But more fundamentally, popular science function today, as written by authors like N.K. Jemisin, Martha Wells, and Tamsin Muir, which I don't know who any of those are, is more likely to be concerned with questions of identity and combating imperialism. It is also more likely to be written from a marginalized perspective, which have valid reasons to distrust institutions and authority. For many of these writers, concepts like professionalism have questionable implications. See, for instance, the many ways that black women wearing their hair in a natural style have been labeled unprofessional. A leader who expects you to behave in a certain way and yells at you when you don't is less likely to be understood as a benevolent, if demanding, aspirational figure than one of the many petty tyrants who run storefronts around the country. In other words, it's a vast, stark difference between the writers of Old Trek and the writers of New Trek. The Edward Jellicoe or Terrence Fletcher, then Benjamin Sisko and Raymond Holt. Besides, nobody likes any of America's institutions anymore. And for all that, Star Trek is ostensibly international. It is a fundamentally American franchise. Yes, it is. Even though it is worldwide, there's just some things that, as a non-U.S. person watching it, may or may not totally understand. That goes from Old Trek as in New Trek as well. Gallup polls about Americans' faith in U.S. institutions shows it's hovering at or about near record-breaking lows, spawning a great deal of hand-wringing from people across the political spectrum. These apparently untrustworthy institutions range from purely political ones like the presidency, Supreme Court, to the church or organized religion, wherever that means, banks, and newspapers. Although some of these institutions are doing better than others, Gallup shows a 65% approval rating for small businesses, whereas everybody hates Congress, and all down from historical averages. What are professionalism and duty? And sorry, but I am going to read this whole article because it's really good. And a lot of it really speaks to the way I personally feel as a Trekkie penguin about the differences between old Trek and new Trek, and even modern day culture. What are professionalism and duty if not the suppression of individual quirks in service of a larger goal or institution? Exactly. In other words, you put aside your own feelings and beliefs to serve a greater organization. In this case, we're talking about Starfleet. A Starfleet officer could not be a member of Starfleet if he didn't agree with Starfleet ideals and did not be willing to his duty to give his life to those ideals, to die for the prime directive to stay in place, for example. If you don't understand what the prime directive is, the prime directive says that basically you see a first contact situation on a planet in Star Trek that is a alien race that is not at the same level developmentally as the Federation is or Starfleet is. Instead, you have to make sure that you don't contaminate their culture. That's what the prime directive is. And that means even go as far as to, if you have to, even give up your life to protect the prime directive so that that culture does not get affected or infected, so to speak, by your contaminating it with your modern day futuristic stuff. A good example of that, have you ever seen the Abrams Star Trek 2 movie, the Beyond Darkness? The one that has Khan in it, that played by played by Benedict Cumberbatch. At the very beginning of that, you see Kirk and I think it's McCoy are running from this indigenous species. They broke the prime directive to try to save this planet from destruction, and they ended up revealing the Enterprise coming up out of the water, and this primitive people started worshiping the ship, thinking it was some great deity. That's going against the prime directive. That's contamination of the culture. That's also an example of where they didn't adhere to the prime directive. And I'm not saying that in even old Trek that they didn't break the prime directive. Sometimes they did. But like I said, there's always the exception and not the rule. My point here is that the stark differences between that is modern day Trek just kind of throws that stuff out the window and they do whatever they want. They don't adhere to professionalism and duty. They don't suppress their individual experiences and quirks or feelings to service the larger institution. Instead, they're actually kind of weary of the institution, aka Starfleet. Duty overrides individual desires or assessments of right and wrong. If I say that it is my duty to do something, then I am saying I have no choice in the matter. That the obligations I have accepted and commitments I have made override my personal desires entirely. I have no choice. I have no say in it. I have abdicated my agency in service of some other power. This is actually how I feel in my relationship with Christ and God. I don't consider my relationship to Christ a duty, but I do feel like there are certain things I should do as a Christian in service to Jesus, in service to God. That I need to give up my own personal desires, take myself off the throne, and adhere to what God wants me to do in my life. It's the same principle here. And modern day Trek is not doing that. They're putting their own personal individual desires above the service of Starfleet and the Federation. It says, I have abdicated my agency in service of some other power, and they must trust this other power more than even their own judgment. This is not to suggest that older Star Trek believed that blindly following orders was correct. That's not what I'm saying here either. First duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, after all. Since at least the Doomsday Machine, originally broadcast in 1967, with Commander Decker, by the way, Star Trek has understood that the command structure is made up of fallible humans who must occasionally be disobeyed in the service of the greater good. But older Trek nevertheless believed in duty, because it believed that Starfleet was a fundamentally good institution. Even if it may be failed by individual bad or misguided actors inside that institution, it elevated Starfleet's regulations and codes of conduct almost to the status of a holy writ. Sure, the 90s era captains frequently bent those regulations when necessary, but always in the service of Starfleet's higher goals. To violate the Prime Directive, what I talked about earlier, Starfleet's first standing order not to interfere with the natural development of any society, was the closest thing to blasphemy as a Starfleet officer could imagine. When they did violate the Prime Directive, it was usually to serve a higher purpose, as when Captain Picard revealed himself to a less developed civilization for the sole purpose of convincing them he wasn't a god. It says potato here. But it is difficult to be seriously inspired by the notion of duties if one has a deep distrust of institutions that assign such duties. That's what modern day Trek writers have. They don't believe in institutions. They have a severe distrust of them. And it shows in their writing. It shows in modern Trek. If Starfleet is just another deeply flawed institution, prone to giving out as many self-serving and unethical orders as any other human construct, it is much harder to take the notion of duty seriously. Of course, the characters written by 21st century authors who are animated by the deep distrust of American institutions as the rest of us are less likely to justify themselves with the language of duty than they are by reference to personal morality and authenticity. And of course, they're going to be skeptical of rank and hierarchy because they don't believe these things are necessarily signs of actual merit or accomplishment any more than the rest of us do. It is thus to no surprise that as Star Trek tries to change and stay relevant to a 21st century audience, its preoccupations change too. And wherever one's politics, there are plenty of things to criticize about specific choices associated with Starfleet through the Star Trek 57-year run. Yet, this writer worries if Star Trek is supposed to start from an assumption that Starfleet and the Federation are a quasi-utopian, we worry about what it says about our collective imaginations if we can't let the institutions of that fictional utopia be utopian. If we can't even trust Starfleet, who can they trust? So there you go. That, in my opinion, is kind of the whole thing that's wrong with current Trek. It's not holding to the ideals of what made Trek Trek. Professionalism, duty, truth, honor, hopefulness, believing in the quasi-utopian federation. And believing that they aren't, yes, it's got fallible humans in it, but the ideals of Starfleet is to be trusted, is to be adhered to serve a higher purpose in that show. So anyway, that's this little penguin's two thoughts on everything. And hopefully you, like I said, if you are someone that likes modern day Star Wars and Star Trek and all this other stuff, more power to you. I'm not trying to tell you not to watch it. I'm just trying to tell you this is the way this penguin thinks about it. This is how I feel about modern day Trek, and I'd like for it to change. I don't see it changing. I am very apathetic about it now. which never thought I'd feel that way about Star Trek ever in my entire life, but I am. And it'd be nice if it ever got back to what Star Trek really was. I just don't know if that's possible in this day and age with the way the culture is. I don't know. This penguin could be wrong. But nevertheless, I'd love to know what your thoughts are and what you think about all this and these articles and so forth. And leave a comment down in the description if you want to about it. And I would definitely like to be able to hear what you say about it, even if you don't agree with me or if you do agree with me. Either way, if you like what I have been talking about today, I hope you give me a like and subscribe. It really helps out my YouTube algorithm. It's not my algorithm, I guess, but the algorithm that looks at my stuff. Nevertheless, as always, I'm the crazy little Star Wars and Trekkie penguin named Whataboutbob, and I got to go charge up some phasers and put them on the charger because they kind of ran out of power, and I need to be able to go and shoot some Cardassians because they're trying to steal my iced coffee, and I can't have that. Blasted fish Cardassians. Anyway, I'll catch you later, peeps. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Live long and prepare to die. That's actually a Klingon phrase. Anyway.